And there's one thing I really want to say to Donald Trump. If you come for my people, you come through me. So come and get me.
Señores, lo que vimos el día de hoy fue un momento que no se ve todos los días. Un gobernador demócrata mirando a la cámara, hablándole de frente a un presidente que amenaza con utilizar el poder para silenciar a sus opositores. J.B. Pritzker, mis amigos, no dudó, no titubeó y dejó claro que en Illinois no se van a arrodillar ante los caprichos de un condenado que fantasea con ser dictador. Sin duda no fue un intercambio normal, para muchos es el inicio de algo. Pero bueno, vamos a verlo paso a paso. J.B. Pritzker arranca fijando las reglas del juego. Que aquí no hay equidistancia posible, cuando quien amenaza con encarcelar a un gobernador es un convicto que ya demostró su desprecio por la ley. Y ojo, lo dice sin adornos. Si vienes por mi gente, vienes por mí.
Well, let's start with the idea that this is a convicted felon. I mean, think about that. Who's threatening to jail me. I gotta say, this guy's unhinged, he's insecure, he's a wannabe dictator. And there's one thing I really want to say to Donald Trump. If you come for my people, you come through me. So come and get me.
A partir de ahí, Pritzker ya no suelta el tema y explica con calma por qué es que esto no solo es un pleito personal, sino que es una amenaza al contrapeso entre estados y el gobierno federal. Porque claro, no le compra el show a Trump del mano dura, sino que desmonta esta fanfarronería de esos anuncios, ¿no?, que buscan asustar en titulares y redes, pero que al final se derrumban cuando se piden hechos o una base legal. Y bueno, él insiste, no hay nada en la ley que permita lo que Trump sugiere. Y eso, amigos, es clave, porque eso rompe la narrativa del miedo con reglas y con constitución.
You know the expression, Trump always chickens out taco. And I got to say, he can't arrest. We've done nothing wrong here. And very importantly, it's Donald Trump that is breaching the Constitution, breaking the law. We're taking him to court, and I believe we're going to win.
Right now, in the Chicagoland area, the Texas National Guard is staging for a deployment that Governor Greg Abbott has ordered. What's the latest? Do you know where they are, what they're doing at this hour?
Well, to be clear, Donald Trump ordered it and federalized those troops, and Greg Abbott's just going along. This is the same guy, by the way, Greg Abbott, who last year complained when Joe Biden tried to call up his National Guard and actually wrote a letter, signed a letter, opposing that. Now he's okay with it because why? He's a lackey of Donald Trump. So we know that the Texas National Guard has been staging in Illinois. They're not yet, as far as I understand, on the streets, but I want you to know, the federal government is not communicating with our state.
They're not talking to you about where these troops are going.
It's unconscionable. This has never happened before. They're calling out troops onto the streets of a state that doesn't want them. And they're not even telling us where they're going to go, what they're going to do. This hasn't happened, I don't think, since the Civil War.
Luego viene ese movimiento que cambia el tablero, amigos. Vamos a demandar. Presentar una demanda obviamente no es un gesto simbólico, ¿no? Es llevar la pelea a un terreno donde Trump ha perdido más que cualquiera, más aún cuando se le exige prueba o fundamento. Bueno, él lo dice claro, no hubo coordinación, no hubo transparencia y en Illinois no van a permitir guardias ni fuerzas federalizadas actuando como la policía política en las calles. Pues bueno, escuchemos.
On the streets, even before the National Guard has made it to the streets of Illinois, you've got the Border Patrol. I was in Cicero yesterday, a 90% Latino population, and I watched as they not only picked people off the streets, but family members would come up to me and ask me where their family members were. I watched you with Rachel the other night here on MSNBC, and you were talking about how CBP has basically used the justification of the 100-mile border rule to allow the deployment here, and they're saying the border of Lake Michigan, the coast of Lake Michigan is the border. Lake Michigan, many people reached out to me and said, Lake Michigan doesn't even touch Canada. Are you thinking about suing to stop the deployment of the Border Patrol here as well?
Look, I think it's important to recognize that the Trump administration doesn't seem to respect any laws in the United States. They just do what they want to do, and they'll keep doing it unless someone stops them. here in Illinois, we're stopping it. We're doing everything that we can to push back. And yeah, they've got armed, we're talking about automatic weapons and camouflaged, and they're not soldiers, right? These are ICE and Customs and Border Patrol agents that are roaming the streets of Chicago, in downtown Chicago. Why? It's a show. It's a show of force. And why does Donald Trump want to do that? And I've said this before, and I think it's important for people to hear it. He wants to militarize major cities across the United States, especially blue cities in blue states, because he wants us to get used to the idea of military on the streets, military troops, because there are 2026 elections. I believe that he's going to post people outside of ballot boxes and polling places, and if he needs to, in order to control those elections, he'll assume control of the ballot boxes and count the votes himself. He promised to do that. He threatened to do that back in 2020. Didn't get the chance to do it. I believe he would do it in 2026.
Y atención, señores, con esto, porque Pritzker relata la presencia de agentes con armas automáticas y camuflaje en zonas urbanas. Bueno, amparándose, ¿no?, en la vieja excusa de las 100 millas desde la frontera, usando incluso hasta el lago Michigan como pretexto. Y ese detalle a mí me parece brutal porque nos muestra la lógica, ¿no?, del espectáculo, que es mostrar fuerza para sembrar miedo. Y bueno, Pritzker lo desnuda. No es seguridad, es teatro para intimidar a comunidades enteras y normalizar escenas que jamás deberían ser cotidianas en una democracia.
Believe we'll have free and fair elections in the United States of America during the 2026 midterms?
If we all stand up and speak out, we sure as heck will. And you see there are literally hundreds of people here who are standing up to speak out. And we've seen in the No Kings protests and others, millions of people standing up. We need more.
I asked you when I saw you the other day about if the president invokes the Insurrection Act. You said you use every tool at your disposal to stop the deployment of federal troops on the streets of Chicago and throughout your state. Are you willing to direct the state police to arrest any federal officials for what they're doing here?
Look, we don't break the law here in Illinois. I'm not going to direct our state police to break the law the way that Donald Trump directs people to break the law. What we will do is fight like heck in the courts. We have to rely upon judges. And by the way, a Trump-appointed judge made the decision on Oregon and the calling out of the California National Guard. Judges will and can do the right thing. We have to rely upon our courts. I'm not looking beyond that. We have to make sure that happens. But the other thing we have to make sure that happens is we elect good people to the Congress. Because in the end, if Congress is not asking questions, holding hearings, and holding the president accountable, he will just run roughshod across our states.
Y bueno, luego escuchamos esto que pasó de que habían periodistas que habían sido alcanzados por paper balls, clérigos agredidos mientras oraban, gente intimidada por el simple hecho de que sacabas tu celular para grabar. Y bueno, él mandó un mensaje útil, directo y de manual, ¿no?, que es el: hombre, conoce tus derechos, saca tu teléfono y fílmalo. Si el miedo, amigos, es la táctica, pues la gente tiene que entender que documentar es el único antídoto. Tener pruebas. Que todos sepan que se puede, porque se puede. ¿Y qué es lo que no se puede hacer, no? Que todo quede registrado. Esa es la clave en este momento.
Well, first, we've made sure that people know their rights and they know how to find out what their rights are, because we don't want them picked up off the streets just because they're brown or black, just because they happen to be undocumented and have committed no crimes. Remember, he said he was going after the worst of the worst. It's not going after the worst of the worst when you're just literally stopping children who happen to be brown and asking them for papers as if, you know, they're going to have proof that they're a U.S. citizen. So first, know your rights. Second, we want everybody to pull out their phones, an Android, an iPhone, whatever you've got, and film everything you see, because we take that to court. We also show it to the public, and it's one of the reasons that so many people are speaking up and acting up in order to fight Donald Trump.
Y bueno, cierra con una promesa y con una ruta clara. Lo llevaremos a los tribunales y ganaremos. Tribunales para frenar el exceso. Congreso para supervisar y poner los límites. Y ciudadanía para no ceder ni un centímetro de los derechos. Claramente no pide aplausos, ¿no?, sino que pide participación. Y bueno, que cada quien haga su parte, porque la democracia, amigos, a estas alturas, se los aseguro, no se sostiene sola.
They're seeing this is not the country that we grew up in. This is not the country that we want. And so that's very important. And then lastly, again, we got to take them to court. We got to win. It looks like we're going to do that.
For someone who has been threatened with arrest by the President of the United States in the last 24 hours, it's nice to see you out here on the street with all these people. And I'm grateful for your time.
Appreciate you,
want to talk to you. Okay, thank you. Governor J.B. Pritzker, I appreciate it.
Ahí lo tienen, amigos, un gobernador que no solo habla fuerte, sino que actúa. Va a presentar demandas, va a denunciar el abuso y va a convocar a la gente a que no se deje intimidar por uniformes, por luces y por titulares vacíos. Pues bueno, señores, ahora pasemos al siguiente tema porque lo que se acaba de escuchar en el entorno de Trump, amigos, es algo escalofriante. Un ex funcionario de la propia Casa Blanca acaba de lanzar una advertencia directa. Que esto es tan solo el comienzo. Y ojo que no lo dice cualquiera, ¿no? Lo dice alguien que trabajó dentro del círculo más cercano al presidente. En pocas palabras y el contexto, durante un debate en MSNBC, varios analistas llegaron a discutir el caso judicial en contra del exdirector del FBI, despedido por Trump, James Comey. Y justamente ahí, una ex funcionaria del gobierno de Trump dejó clara y, claro, que estas acciones no se tratan de justicia, sino que realmente es lo que todos sospechan, que es más obvio, es una venganza política. Es más, ella advierte que el objetivo no es mejorar el país, sino que estos 4 años de gobierno de Trump son para castigar a todos los que se le enfrentaron. Es más, lo dijo textualmente, esto es solo el comienzo. Veamos este fragmento.
So this is unusual, is it not, Ken? This is a place known as the Rocket Docket. They get things moving. January 5th, did it seem like there was any alternative given everything that Lisa just laid out?
Yes, and I don't think that January 5th is going to hold as a trial date, Chris, because the prospects for discovery in this case are enormous. Just take, for example, the idea that James Comey and his lawyers want to bring a motion for selective prosecution to get this case thrown out on those grounds. They are going to want to get every scrap of paper, every communication between the White House and the Justice Department, between Justice Department attorneys, between FBI agents, everything to do with how this case was brought, who didn't want to bring it, why the U.S. attorney was fired when he said it wasn't a valid case. They're going to want all of that stuff. They're even going to want a recording of the grand jury proceedings where Lindsay Halligan brought this case and got 14 grand jurors to agree to indict it. And so that's going to take some time. That's not something that can be done even within a few months. That alone, and then, as Lisa said, you have the new prosecutors coming in who don't know anything about the case, that are just getting their arms around it, so they need time to get up to speed. And so this is going to take quite a bit of time, I think, before this thing gets to trial.
So, Rob, you know James Comey, and I thought the stuff that Lisa talked about, those textural elements of today were fascinating, from, a reminder that the daughter got fired, but now she is comforting the mom, and the fact that James Comey is lingering, somebody who is very familiar with being in a courtroom. What do you think the days and weeks and months ahead look like for him?
I think he's very confident, but then again, this is his first time on the other side of the aisle. So that has to be, before, if he was confident about a trial, if he was really feeling good about it, he was going to get a conviction. He wasn't going to go to jail. So I think that probably came into it this morning, but I think he's very confident. His family, made up of lawyers, his daughter, and they are probably confident because they understand the law, and his lawyer does. I think it's probably hardest on his wife. Seeing her husband up there, and they're very close, a very tight family. I think it's probably toughest on her because she, again, is seeing this happen to someone she loves. But I think he's confident. I think he absolutely knows if this goes to trial and he gets a jury, he's going to win the case. I think he's going to hope it's going to be thrown out beforehand. But I also think he probably wants his day in court. I think he wants to have a jury tell America that he's not guilty. Though it is one of those things that puts more pressure on the family having to go through that trial and it not being thrown out. But I think it definitely, him on the other side of the aisle, probably hit home this morning as she talked about that like little laps up there, realizing that he is fighting for his life and he's not just prosecuting.
So, Lisa, if what James Comey wants, understandably, is his day in court, if what he wants is vindication, what does the Trump White House want? Is it only a success if they get a conviction?
I think that's true, Chris. It's only a success if they get a conviction. But I want to pause here and say there has been public reporting from other outlets, and I believe our own, that there are multiple investigations that might be going on with respect to former federal law enforcement and whether or not they broke the law, right? And so this may turn out not to be the only case that's being prosecuted against Jim Comey. This could be not the only district that's prosecuting a case against Jim Comey. This case was brought when it was because the Eastern District of Virginia was ramming up against the statute of limitations for a false statements to Congress charge, because that charge is based on testimony that Jim Comey gave on September 30th of 2020 while he was sitting at his home and testifying over Zoom. That's the reason that the Eastern District of Virginia has venue in this case. So I think for the Trump White House, a conviction is what they want, but it's not necessarily this conviction. And I want to say to you and our viewers, there are reasons to believe that James Comey may never get his day in court, and that would be a victory for him. Pat Fitzgerald outlining today that there are 2 motions he intends to bring on October 20th. One is for vindictive and selective prosecution, basically saying this prosecution is in retaliation for Jim Comey exercising his free speech rights and talking against Donald Trump. But the second motion is based on Lindsay Halligan's being unlawfully appointed as the interim U.S. attorney. And presumably what Fitzgerald is going to argue is because Lindsay Halligan was the only person who signed the indictment in this case, if she was unlawfully appointed, the whole thing must fall. And so much as Jim Comey told the world on Instagram he wants to go to trial, you better believe that Pat Fitzgerald is going to want to try those 2 options first to ensure we're never back in this courtroom for a trial.
So, Sarah, let me get your take on this and the White House and what might be going on in there. It is no secret that Trump has escalated from his first term. It is no secret, because he has said it, that he is seeking retribution. Do you see this potentially going on in multiple venues, that even if there isn't a success in the form of a conviction, there are other things that this president can do?
Yeah, this is exactly what I warned about in the lead up to the 2024 election, that I knew that a second Trump term was not going to be about bettering the lives of everyday Americans. It was going to be about him wanting retribution against his perceived enemies. And James Comey is one of those folks who is at the top of Trump's list. And we're seeing this play out now with them indicting him. But also, as you mentioned, I think that there are other avenues in which they could seek and get revenge against people, whether that's making them rack up lawyer fees in frivolous lawsuits or having the IRS target them. There's a number of different ways in which they can go after people and make life hard for them. And something that really stuck out to me was MSNBC's own reporting today about how an FBI agent was fired because he refused to do a perp walk with James Comey. And I believe that the Trump administration wanted this perp walk to happen to make a public spectacle of this, to make an example out of James Comey and show their power and flex their muscle of, look at what we're doing to this man who spoke out against us and went against us. We're going to do this to others as well, and you should be scared. And I think that there will be a long list of others who will follow. James Comey's just the first coming, and maybe there will be other charges that they'll levy against him. But I'm sure that this is just the beginning, and that they will no doubt and undoubtedly go against other perceived enemies of Donald Trump.
The chilling effect. So, Ken, in Senate testimony yesterday, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, was pressed on whether the White House had played a role in this Comey case. I want to play for folks what she said.
Did you discuss James Comey with the President of the United States? He was sitting just to your left.
Well, 2 seats down, yes. 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any conversations I've had or not have with the President of the United States.
Because the American public is entitled to know.
If there was, Ken, any coordination with the White House, could that impact any move for dismissal?
Oh, 100%. That will be the key issue in the motion to dismiss this case on the grounds of selective prosecution. The question is, how much can the Comey team get in discovery? For example, that conversation that was just described there, likely the White House would assert executive privilege and say that, you know, the Comey team in this trial has no business learning what was said between the Attorney General and the President. But what if, for example, another White House aide, Stephen Miller or someone else, was coordinating with the Justice Department about this case? Or what if there are communications between Justice Department officials about the pressure they were under from the White House? Or what if the fired U.S. attorney is brought to testify before a congressional hearing? Or there's just many ways in which evidence can be gleaned that would be relevant to this Comey trial about whether the White House essentially orchestrated this prosecution. There's a lot of evidence in the public domain, but there's a lot more.
Y es que, amigos, me sorprende que ni siquiera lo intenten ocultar, ¿no? Públicamente lo admite ya la gente. Este segundo mandato de Trump no tiene nada que ver con gobernar, sino con ajustar cuentas. Básicamente es una confesión para muchos, ¿no? Porque es un exfuncionario. Donald Trump y su equipo no quieren justicia. Quieren humillar, quieren arruinar, quieren silenciar a cualquiera que en algún momento se le haya cruzado en su primer mandato. Recordemos que para muchos el primer mandato de Trump fue considerado como un resentimiento que le tenía a Obama, ¿no? No sé si lo recuerdan. Pero bueno, fíjense en algo que ella menciona, que incluso el FBI habría despedido a agentes que se negaron a participar en un show público para exponer a James Comey, ¿no? Amigos, el mensaje es clarísimo. Si tú no haces lo que el líder supremo quiere, estás fuera. Y claro, los seguidores de Trump lo celebran, ¿no? Como una victoria sobre el sistema, el outsider, cuando en realidad es el sistema el que está siendo destruido desde adentro. Lo más aterrador de toda esta advertencia, ¿no? No se trata del tema de James Comey en sí, sino que, amigos, hay una lista larga de enemigos, los cuales no duden que van a ser perseguidos. Periodistas, funcionarios, exmiembros del FBI, fiscales, cualquiera que se haya atrevido a hablar en su contra. Y bueno, si lo pensamos bien, tampoco es que sea un patrón nuevo, ¿no? Su primer mandato, Trump intentó presionar hasta lo último al Departamento de Justicia para que investiguen a Hillary Clinton, investiguen a Obama, hasta muchos periodistas críticos, según recuerdo. Claro, la diferencia es que ahora ya no tiene filtro. Él mismo lo ha dicho, ¿no? En sus mitines en los meses de campaña, que llegó para limpiar la casa, para castigar a los traidores. Así que, señores, cuando su gente dice que esto es solo el comienzo, yo creo que hay que tomarlo en serio. Lo que se viene no va a ser una pelea política. Es una guerra, señores, contra cualquier forma de oposición o fiscalización. Y claro, eso nos deja una serie de preguntas, al menos a mí, sin duda. ¿Realmente los estadounidenses quieren un país donde el poder se use para vengarse de los rivales? Uno donde la justicia se aplique sin miedo ni favoritismo, ¿no sería lo real? Lo que está pasando con James Comey, ¿no? Es el primer paso. Es un modelo de gobierno basado en el poder de la venganza. Y claro, si nadie lo detiene en este momento, que yo dudo mucho que lo detengan, mañana cualquiera va a ser el objetivo. Así que bueno, quiero saber qué opinan ustedes. ¿Creen que Trump realmente va a utilizar el poder? Ya lo está haciendo, pero ¿ustedes creen que va a continuar con esto en los próximos años para perseguir a sus enemigos? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido, suscríbete a nuestro canal, porque amigos, cada día tenemos noticias más y más interesantes. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.